Hello, everybody, and welcome to another SIG Windows meetup. Thank you all for attending. If you're here a couple of seconds ago, me and Patrick were discussing the release notes for 1.12, and we're asked to kind of fill in some of the details from major accomplishments from our SIG. If you guys are familiar and you've attended the last couple of weeks, Patrick shared that we're likely not going to go GA with 1.12. We're going to push to 1.13. And I updated the entire community last Thursday on the community meetup, mentioning that we are postponing the GA for another milestone, just to give us a little more time to focus on stability, performance, and stress, while at the same time not investing in any new major features. Patrick, you want to get started on the agenda if you have anything specific you want to mention?
Yeah, I can do that. Let me share this out real quick. Okay. Yeah, so just a quick update on the Trello. So some of the stuff that was in 12, I just pushed out to 13. So that's just, as we mentioned, the proposed GA stuff and conformance bugs are, of course, the top priority there. We still have a couple PRs that are waiting to be merged for the Node EDE tests. Actually, there's only one left in the Kubernetes repo. The rest are over in test infra. But those are getting reviews right now, so that's good because we really need this right at the beginning of the milestone if we want to declare Windows stable by the end of it, because we need those results running there. And then a couple of PRs, like there were ones for network metrics, even though that we opened them during 12, we weren't able to get them reviewed in time. And then once they reviewed them, they said, oh, well, this one's got, a minor change to an API. It's in code freeze. So they pushed that out to 13. So that one's coming there. And so in terms of remaining work in 12, this one is still up for final review if we can get someone from SIG that's needed to fix some of the DNS bugs. It would also need changes in the CNI plugins. But if we can get that in 12, that would be great, because then the CNI stuff can come later without having to wait for 13. Otherwise, I think if it moves to 13, that's unfortunate, but it's not going to be a huge difference there, because 13 is where we're looking for all the conformance stuff. Then I think the HPA dependent stuff got merged. Oh wait, no, the network stats are not merged, but the ones for CPU and memory are there. So I believe that will fix horizontal pod auto scaling. And I know that David, who's not on the call, was trying to get that working. Is there any chance anybody else has tried HPA on 12? No, not yet. Okay. All right. Well, we can check back on that one later. So that was just a little bit of the stuff there, and then the other feature work that I had proposed around implementing runtime classes and GMSA. I just continued pushing those out until after we get to stable for the rest of the stuff. So the other thing that I want to mention is I'm basically trying to get some more people to help with these stability and bug pushes. Like I know we've got Ben and others that have been sort of hunting to find all the info they needed to be able to do builds and contribute. And so yesterday I went ahead and started trying to put all of that into one repo. That's right there. But basically what I was trying to do is just get everything that's needed, so that way people know how to how to build, deploy a cluster, and replace binaries on there. And so if anyone's got suggestions on other things to add to this or ways to improve it, please let me know, or of course PRs are welcome. But one of the main things I'd propose doing in this one is I actually have a quick little Vagrant VM that'll bring everything up, so that way you can run the same tools that are used in the official Kubernetes build process to do the cross compiles. Where is it? It's somewhere down here. I went too far. Oh, there it is. So this actually uses the same containers that are used on the Kubernetes upstream builds with the same make files to go ahead and build all the Windows binaries that are there. And so that works really, really quick. You can get this VM set up in about 2 minutes, and then your first build will be done in 5. So I think that'll hopefully help a few more people get down the path to being able to help us start fixing bugs. So I've got a link to that. So for version 13, the main thing I'm going to be focusing on is trying to do most of the organization stuff with other SIGs and really delving into things like the API docs that are needed. And so where I'm really looking for more help is, I've got some people at Microsoft that are helping with the bug fixes and the stability investigation, but I think that there are still more bugs to find that just aren't yet filed. And so what I'm really looking for is for people to go ahead and start, getting this stuff deployed, run the tests, and then, just, sort of start filing and fixing bugs. And then if we look at the, what we already have over here in the Kubernetes repo, there's also a reasonable backlog that we need to start going through as well. Yeah, so we've got 36 open, and there's already, a whole bunch here that that could be looked at. And so if anyone wants to take any of those, let me know, and we can, Michael or I can get those reassigned. But we basically need to start going through this list and either getting things closed if they're not relevant, or start getting PRs in to fix the remaining ones that are there. Then the other thing I wanted to do is start talking about was sort of setting a few deadlines for ourselves for 13. So the 13 schedule is not out yet, but looking at the past releases, especially the one from the end of last year that lined up with KubeCon, it looks like we're probably going to have around 12 weeks starting from the beginning of October, because version 12 is set to be completed on, I think it's something like the 28th, and I think October 1st is probably going to be the first day of the milestone. So that basically gives us all of October and November, and then into December to sort of get a release done. So with that in mind, it looks to me like we would probably need to be narrowing down on sort of on what the CRI and CNI that we want to use for upstream testing is, based on what's most stable. If we look at the result report down there, Adelina's got test results published, working with her team at Cloudbase that are using KubeNet and Azure CNI right now. And they're working on OVN next, but I think we're basically going to need to pick what the settings are and then stabilize on those for upstream testing sometime in mid-October, so that way we can leave that as kind of a constant target up until code freeze, which is probably going to be mid-November. And then so after a few weeks of code freeze, then they'd be able to hopefully release for KubeCon is what my guess is. But like as I mentioned, this is still a guess at this point because there's not an official schedule. But if they wanted to get something done by KubeCon, that's basically what SIG release would need to do. And so for CRI, I've got a link down here. So I started playing with this last week, and sometime this week, Microsoft should be releasing a build that's new enough to work with Containerd. And actually, I think it's build 1755 and higher. So I think one of those is available for Windows 10 right now. I need to double check, and then hopefully there'll be a server release soon. I know that when they do release another server preview build, it'll be at least that build, if not newer. And then so that should be able to work okay with Containerd. And so I'm hoping I can get some more details out on that soon, so people can start trying that. One of the benefits I see in switching the Containerd model is that Docker shim is something that's been, we've been maintaining it within this SIG for the purposes of Windows support, but it hasn't really been getting any other improvements. And so my suspicion is that there may be other, Linux-specific fixes in there that were needed to pass conformance tests that Windows just never got because the tests weren't in place. And so I think there's a chance that Containerd could behave, better or worse. And so I'd like to, get some numbers on that, if at all possible. So I think those are the main things I had. Did anybody have questions or want to discuss any of those some more?
I'm completely in favor of the Containerd just to see. It seems to be a future direction as well across the board, so I'm in favor of that. But no other questions. Thank you, Patrick. At least not from me.
I had a question about the conformance tests, and is there a plan so I know the approach that is being taken right now is to have separate images for running on Windows, that are like Windows Server images that kind of fill in for all the Linux conformance images.
Yeah.
But is there a plan to have that be made official somehow?
Yeah, so there's a PR out there that lets you basically switch what container registry you're using. And so that'll help for people that are testing, within their own network environments as well. And so that's basically what we have, and there's a PR open for that. I've brought this up with the SIG testing and SIG testing infrastructure, and there's been so two thoughts here, but I haven't seen any action yet. One of them is that some of the images that are used today do use the multi-architecture manifests on Linux, but that really only solves a problem where if you've got a mix of, say, x64 and, say, ARM v7 or ARM64 images, it would let you test those clusters, but it really depends on the image that they're being used to already have the build available. The difficulty that we have with a lot of these images is that the core maintainers are not supporting Windows. And so in most of these cases, like BusyBox is a really good example, someone basically took a point-in-time snapshot of the BusyBox source, and the majority of the work that they did wasn't actually changing the BusyBox source. It was creating a build system that could build it. And so that's where they were bringing in things like the, not SIG-Win, but the MSys runtime and things like that that were needed to be able to build that source code, along with the GCC cross compiler. And because those changes were so drastic, the maintainers for the Linux stuff, if they didn't care about Windows, they just aren't taking those submissions back. And so one of the things I've proposed is that, to me, it makes sense that things that Kubernetes depends on should probably be in a repo where the Kubernetes project can maintain them. So that way, let's say, one of the options used in one of those containers was deprecated. Rather than us finding that with a broken Kubernetes test and then having to, rewrite it, we could just pick a version for that container, use it, and be able to rebuild it from source if needed. And so I haven't gone through the formal proposal on that yet. Some people have said, yeah, maybe we should do that rather than depending on publicly available images that we don't control. But I don't really know what a path to a decision is there. Anyway, so I think one option would be focus on upstream only and get them to do Windows builds. I think that would be a very, very costly approach. I think it's possible, but I think that I don't think I'd want to conflate it with Kubernetes conformance, because that's really about how those projects are choosing to manage themselves that are outside the purview of Kubernetes. Whereas if we took the approach of being able to rebuild what's needed for Kubernetes test pass, I think that's more within the scope. Did you have any thoughts there?
No, I didn't really have any thoughts on how to reconcile the problem. It's just, it seemed it just seems like it's still kind of far. Like, I see how the conformance tests are working, but it still feels like it's kind of like based on a bunch of like the kind of like hand-rolled images that it doesn't feel very first class, and it's hard to imagine how we're going to get there.
If I can add something here. So we do as much as possible to maintain those images. Claudio is actually doing that constantly, updating them and so on and so forth. They're publicly available. The only issue is that, besides what Patrick already said, the way even it was proposed at some points to use that the image manifest, though that didn't work, as Patrick said. Our problem here is that even with the test infra bits, while they were willing to add it, they were never willing to maintain it. Let's put it so. So that's as Patrick basically said, but I'm just talking out of my experience with the cube test. So if it didn't seem something, because at the end of the day, we could just leave and the code is there, they have to maintain it, right? So just to be clear, I think it's going to be very, very hard, and I don't think images are necessarily something that we should focus on now.
Plus, the way you build images on Linux and how you build images on Windows, especially the run commands in the Docker files, can vary a lot in a lot of scenarios. You'll mostly be using Bash for Linux containers, while those things will not work properly for Windows containers. That's another issue. And not only that, a lot of images are using BusyBox, but it's not fully Windows compliant. For example, at one point, I was having some issues with a BusyBox command, NC. The issue was that the NC offered by BusyBox was extremely minimal. It only had like 1 or 2 extra options. While trying to build NC with extra options, a newer version, so on and so forth, it actually failed for Windows. And this is something that I actually talked with the ones who maintain the Windows BusyBox image, and they do not have support for a couple of things like SIG alarm or SIG child signals, which are needed for that, or send message or receive message for UDP connection or communication. So there are quite a lot of differences between Linux containers and Windows containers and their respective Docker files. And we basically try to solve those differences as well.
Also, so again, from my experience, going back into OpenStack work that we did a while ago, the way I look at this is, yeah, we have these images, these Windows images, but trying to force it into even the way it is now with the BusyBox images that we have and stuff like that is not necessarily proper from the test point of view. We're basically making them work, but they're not really specific Windows tests. They're just the images are just a way to make the tests work on Windows. If I'm making the difference clear. So probably after the infra is up and running, we go to GA and so on, we can start talking even with the test infra guys about, okay, fine, let's add some Windows specific tests and so on and so forth with Windows specific images and so on. So that's the way I see it. Other than that, I think it would be a mistake from, at least from a time perspective, to think about the images now. They're just, as I see them, just a way to have those conformance tests run. Other changes in tests can come on afterwards, but right now, it's not relevant.
Yeah, and if anyone wants to start adding Windows-specific tests, I think that's also something that would be very helpful if someone wants to start some contributions there.
Yeah, definitely. And the images you can use like proper Windows-specific images, not a hack BusyBox. Like actual proper images. Tag the tests with Windows only, or whatever tag that is available, and the image can be in our repo that we already use or whatever.
Yeah, sounds good. Okay. So I saw Deep unmute earlier. Did you have a comment on that too?
Nothing specific. Yeah, like I pretty much agree with what was said, that it'd be great to have some PowerShell-based tests. I can see what I can do from my end to get some resources.
Okay. All right. Do anyone have any other topics, or I think we're basically out of time?
The only one thing I had was, I know we talked about this briefly earlier. It was around storage. So I know like the initial plan is 113 with flex volumes. But one of the other developments that happened was like CSI more or less stabilized during 112, and 113 is the planned GA for it. The thing is like, to make CSI work in Linux, they're using a bunch of these sidecar containers, like a registrar and a couple of other ones, to basically register the plugins and then do the appropriate handshaking between Kubernetes and CSI to make it work. So given that Windows will also GA in 113, are we planning to kind of roll with the flex volume model? Because that's completely going to be kind of put on a frozen mode. So if there are bugs, that'll probably not, like, it'll be hard to kind of push those PRs in. So yeah, well, like, would CSI be too big a thing given all the other things we need to kind of get resolved for GA?
Yeah, so what I had proposed was that we should review the CSI spec to make sure it's something that we believe can be implemented on Windows, or propose changes to it before 13 ships. And so I've asked Subodh and Nick, who have been working on the flex volume stuff, to review that from the Microsoft side, and then loop you in as well.
Okay.
So that way we can come back with a response to that. So I think the spec needs to be done, but I don't think we actually have to write the code for 13. I think we can do that in 14 or 15.
Okay, sounds good.
As people are available. I think the main thing is making sure that the CSI spec is something that doesn't take a specific OS dependency.
Makes sense.
So.
All right, cool. So it looks like we're out of time. Thank you, Patrick. Thank you, everyone, for attending, and we'll see you guys next week.
Thank you.
Right.
Bye.
Thanks.